Welcome to our Savvy Ladies Wednesday Wisdom webinar. My name is Maggie Montemuro, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator at Savvy Ladies. If you have a question during the presentation, please type it into the chat box. And if you're joining us by phone, you can email your question to info@savvyladies.org. Today's presenter is Sharon Lowenheim, a certified professional organizer. Sharon is the founder and owner of Organizing Goddess, which helps people live large in small spaces. Sharon is an MIT grad and also received her master's and MBA from the University of Pennsylvania. Sharon is also a former president of the NYC chapter of the National Association of Professional Organizers. Thank you for your time today, Sharon, and let's get started.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here today presenting and under the aegis of Savvy Ladies. And this is one of my favorite topics, discard papers fearlessly. I found that in my 9 years of being a professional organizer, when people have papers with dollar signs on them, they panic. They freeze up and they think, don't I have to keep this? They think they need to save everything. So my goal today is to help you separate myth from fact. We only have a half an hour together, but I've been told that you will get a follow-up document, which I put together and will be sending to Maggie, that will give you a little bit more detail, and you can always contact me when the webinar is over if you have any additional questions. So I guess I should have gone to this slide already, but I didn't. So there it is. That's me. Okay, today's goals. So I want to answer 4 questions for you today, and hopefully even a little bit more. The first one is, how many years' worth of tax records am I required to keep? This, I find, is a huge area of misconception about the tax records. So I hope to set you straight on that one. What should I do with bills, receipts, and financial statements? In other words, all of those pieces of paper you get in the mail with dollar signs on them. What to do with them? Are you allowed to throw them away? Next question is, what needs to be shredded? People have a lot of confusion about that, and it's actually much less than you think. And lastly, what important paper should I never get rid of? And this is a really good thing to know so that you don't accidentally put something in the shredder that you shouldn't. At the end, I'll actually give you some opportunities to continue learning from me. So in the meantime, why don't we just move ahead to our first question about tax records. So I'm going to give you a number here which is going to be very surprising to you, which is the federal government has 3 years to audit your return. Most of you are probably sitting there scratching your heads going, I thought it was 7 years, because for some reason the number bounces around that you should keep your tax records for 7 years. The real truth is that the federal government only has 3 years to audit your return in most circumstances, assuming you're a law-abiding citizen and have declared all your income and filed on time, etc. They only have 3 years. Now, then there's also the state return, of course, and most states, including New York State, follow the same 3-year rule. There's a small number of states that have slightly longer, and there's a link as to how to find out that information in the handout that I'll be sending you. But let's assume that you are a New Yorker like me, or you're in a state, as most of them are, that follow the 3-year rule. The way that applies is the 3 years starts from the day that you file your return. So let's assume that, here's an example. Let's assume that you filed your 2011 tax return on time by April 15th, 2012. That's when the 3-year clock starts ticking. So around April 15th, 2015, you can discard the supporting papers, which means that when we get off the phone, you could probably walk over to your shredder and get rid of a lot of paper. Anything from 2011 and before is really kind of a moot point. Now, I just want to point out the last point. My accountant makes me say this every time I give this presentation. Please consult with your tax professional prior to discarding any tax-related papers. You may be in a particular situation where your accountant wants you to hold on to these papers longer, and it's certainly no more than 6 years. But you should check with him or her before you shred anything. But just I'm giving you a heads up. I'm empowering you to be able to go to your tax professional and saying, why am I keeping these more than 3 years? Can I go ahead and shred these? So now what should you go ahead and shred? Some people like to keep the actual tax return for as long as they feel like holding on to it. And, I suppose that's cool, although most of the time when you have to provide a tax return, like if you're trying to buy a co-op or something, they really only need the previous 2 years worth of tax returns. I don't think anyone's ever going to ask you for more than 3 years worth of tax returns. But if you feel most comfortable holding on to the actual tax return for longer, go ahead. But what I'm talking about discarding are all the papers that you have been saving to support the tax deductions, to support the income, et cetera. Those things can really be gone after 3 years because the government isn't going to ask you for them anymore. So let's move on to the next question, bills and receipts. And this is, where the panic sets in and people go, don't I have to save that? So let's start with bills and receipts that support a tax deduction. You should save those, and because you need them when you file your taxes, and then they become part of your tax papers, and the 3-year rule applies. So some examples of things that you might need to support a tax deduction. Let's say, like me, you run a home-based business. So you want to save any papers related to that home-based business because they're going to come into play on figuring out your taxes. Also, if you, on your personal return, if you itemize your deductions, you want to save any papers that, bills and receipts that are going to support that information as well. The next one is save bills and receipts that document an increase in your home's cost basis. So you pay a certain amount for your house or for your apartment, and later on, years from now, when you sell that, you want to be able to show this is the profit I made or the loss I took on this home. So you'll want to know what did this home cost. So it's not just what you spent on it, it's also money that you put into it. So that would be home improvements or things like large appliances, dishwashers, air conditioners, stoves. But also for co-op apartment owners, this is important. When you get your maintenance bill every month, if there's an assessment on it, then you want to hold on to that bill that has the assessment, because that assessment actually can be added to the computation of your home's cost basis. That's because what you're actually doing is paying for improvements to the building and to the common areas, and that actually raises the cost basis of your home. So those bills and receipts that document an increase in your home's cost basis, you want to save. You also want to save receipts for items you might return. In most cases, that's probably going to be clothing that still has the tags on it. Maybe you want to paper clip the receipt to the tag, but it might be other things you buy, maybe even electronics, you're not sure and they're going to work. So hold on to those receipts until you've used the item and know for sure that you want to keep it. You want to save receipts for items that are still under warranty, because if you do have to, for some reason, return that item because it's not working and it's still under warranty, you do want proof of when you purchased it. And keep in mind that if you have a credit card that extends the warranty for double the amount of time, let's say it goes from 1 year to 2 years, you want to hold on to that receipt for that extended warranty period. I also recommend to save receipts for major purchases. I don't really have a good reason why you should save a receipt for a really big ticket item. It just feels right, and all organizers say you should do it. If you buy like a large screen TV and spend hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of dollars on something, you just feel like I want to hold on to the receipt for that. So that could be a separate file. You throw those in case there's issues later. And then the bottom line is, all other receipts and bills can be discarded. So I left the word bills off of the last bullet point, but it should be bills and receipts. You really don't need to save anything else. Now that I've said that, let me tell you what I do with my bills, which you may want to follow or maybe not. So if I've gotten you all excited now about throwing away all of this paper, what I would like to tell you is that I always keep my latest bill from each one of my companies. So I keep my latest Con Ed bill, my Time Warner bill, my AT&T bill, and that's because if you want to call the company about an issue, it's really nice to just whip out that bill. It's got the phone number, it's got the account number, it's got all of the services that you're paying for, and you have that information right in front of you. So I do, after I get my bill, I look it over, make sure they got my last payment, make sure everything looks in order. Then I file it away in my file cabinet in a folder that has that bill name on it, like Con Edison, and then I pull out the old one from last month and shred that. So if you do decide to save that most recent bill, make sure you put it in a place where you can find it again, and make sure you get rid of the previous one. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself back into a situation where you're building up too much paper. So moving on from bills and receipts, I know you probably have lots of questions, and I will be taking questions at the end. Let's talk about financial statements, another point of panic for a lot of people. Most of the time, you do not need to save any financial statements, and I'll give you the exceptions here. You should save bank statements for business bank accounts. So again, like for me, I run a home-based business, so I save my monthly statement from my bank account, put that away with my tax records in case there's any questions in the future about any of my incomes and outflows. You should save confirmations of investment purchases and sales, as you'll need these to compute your taxable gain in the year of sale. This is very similar to the idea of documenting the cost basis for your house. Let's say you buy a stock for $100, sell it a few years later for $120. You only have to pay a tax on the $20 profit. But what if you can't prove that you paid $100 for that? The government is going to get a 1099 showing that you made a sale of $120, and they're going to want you to pay tax on the whole $120. So you need to have documentation in your back pocket that, no, I only paid $100 for it. So whenever you make investment purchases, stocks, bonds, any other kinds of investments, you want to hold out to those confirmations so that when you sell it, you can match those up and know how to declare that. Now, many investment companies, if you're doing it through a company, they will show the cost basis of the item right on the statement. And if they do that, you don't need to keep the confirmations. But not all of them do, so just keep an eye on that. If you are over 70, then you want to save your year-end IRA statements. You don't need them throughout the year. You just need the year-end one, because if you're over 70 and a half, you need to start taking what's called a required minimum distribution, and that is always based on what was the value on December 31st of your IRA the previous year. So you want to hold on to that. All other statements can be discarded. I can just hear you all right now running over to your file cabinets or those piles on your desk, getting them out and throwing them away, which is fantastic. So I'm going to move on to what to shred, because before you start throwing anything away, you should know, what am I really allowed to just put in the garbage, and what should I really be putting through the shredder? First of all, we're all worried about identity theft. So anything with an account number on it or your Social Security number on it, which will mean every page of your tax return, that needs to be shredded, because you don't want those documents falling into anyone else's hand and stealing your identity. Also, any document containing personal information. So let me tell you the litmus test that I use. I live in an apartment building on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and once a week when it's garbage day, the building staff takes all of the recycling, bags it up into clear plastic bags, and puts it out on the curb, and then the next day it gets picked up by the sanitation department, which means that people can walk down my street and see recycling through the clear plastic bag. So my criterion when I'm holding a piece of paper in my hand and trying to make the decision about should I put it in the shredder or just put it in the recycling bag is, would I want somebody walking down the street to be looking through the bag and seeing this document? And if the answer is no, I shred it. So anything with personal information, maybe it's got financial balances on my accounts, maybe it's medical information, that's going to go in the shredder. And anything that's just a form letter or junk mail or something innocuous, that can go into the recycle bin. So you can set up your own criteria about what to shred. Another thing that you should also shred would be credit card offers. So if you get a piece of mail that says that you have been pre-approved for a credit card, if you just throw that in the recycling or in the garbage, somebody could get hold of that and then apply for credit under your name and change your address, and all sorts of mayhem can occur. So if you get any of those, pull out the part that's got the credit card offer itself with the application with your name, put that through the shredder. The rest of it you can just put in the recycling. So except for those things, all other papers, I think, can be recycled. So let's talk about important papers to keep. So these are all fairly official papers: birth certificate, adoption papers, marriage licenses, divorce decrees, death certificates, citizenship papers, military discharge papers, wills, living wills, power of attorney. What I recommend is that you take these kinds of documents, keep them in a very, very safe place, like a safe deposit box, and that you keep photocopies of them at home, because sometimes you'll be asked to submit one of them, and you don't necessarily need the original. So if you have the photocopies at home, you can just submit the photocopy. But I also want to point out that occasionally you are required to produce one of these documents, and it needs to be the official version, which means it needs to have some sort of seal on it. Something that indicates that it's not a copy. And when you want to have one of those documents, you usually don't want to wait the week or two that it might take you to get it when you apply to get it from wherever they issue them. So if you realize that of these things that I have listed here, you don't have official copies of some of these, what you might want to do sometime in the next few days is get online with the appropriate municipality that issues these for you and get an official copy of your birth certificate or your marriage license, and make sure you have some of those on hand so that if you do get into a situation where you have to produce it, an official copy, that you've got one. Now, one other thing that I didn't put on the slide, but I would like to talk about, is jury duty. When you are on jury duty, they give you a piece of paper at the end as proof that you have served an appropriate number of days on jury duty. And that's an important piece of paper for you to keep, because if you get called for jury duty again before the amount of time that they're supposed to wait, which is usually 3 or 4 years or 6 years, it depends where you live, then you want to be able to produce this piece of paper and say, I was just on jury duty 2 years ago, don't take me off of your list for now. So you want to be able to take that piece of paper, put it in a file labeled jury duty, and put it with your important papers so that when you need it, you can find that when you want to. So that covers the bulk of my presentation, and I'm going to open the floor to questions in a minute. But first, I just wanted to make an offer to you. I know that I'm only just scratching the surface of this topic, and you may have additional questions, and you may also have questions about other areas of organizing other than paper. So what I want to offer to you is, first of all, I send out a weekly newsletter of an organizing tip of the week. If you are interested in being on my mailing list, you can email me with your name and email address, or you can go on my website, which is on the bottom of this slide, and www.organizinggoddess.com, and sign up for it. When you sign up for my mailing list, you get my document called The 10 Biggest Organizing Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. It's very easy to unsubscribe from the list if you decide you don't want it. I also offer a free 30-minute consultation to anybody who is interested. So if you would like to follow up with that and set up a time with me, email me. My email address is right here, Sharon@organizinggoddess.com. Email me so we can set something up and I can answer any additional questions that you have on paper or on any other organizing topic. So those are my offers to you so we can continue this conversation. And now I'm ready to open the floor up for questions.
Thanks, Sharon. That was excellent. We did have some questions that came in, so I'll start with the first one, which is, I'm not that organized about my mail and bills. Sometimes it really piles up on my kitchen table. Is there a strategy to help me stick to managing the paper routinely?
Yeah, it's not clear from the question whether this is mail that's already been opened or mail that's sitting there waiting to be opened. So my first piece of advice is to open your mail every day. That doesn't mean you have to act on it or do anything with it, just open it. Because if you look at a pile of unopened mail, it's very, very intimidating. And if you think about one piece of paper, how thin it is, folded in thirds, you've gone from 1 paper thickness to 3 paper thicknesses. If you put that in an envelope, now you're up to 5 paper thicknesses. If they have a return envelope in there, you're up to 7. And if there's another insert, you're anywhere between 8 and 10 paper thicknesses. So every individual piece of paper in there, the pile is 10 times as big if you keep it in the envelope versus if you don't. Also, looking at sealed envelopes is very intimidating as opposed to pieces of paper. So I advise to open your mail every day, discard the envelopes, discard all the junk, get rid of everything you really don't need, and just have the piece of paper that you're required to act on. Once you do that, that often leads you right into, I'll just act on it. And if you take a sticky note and stick it on the upper right-hand corner and write down what the action is, next time you come across that piece of paper, you'll know right away what you have to do. You won't have to read it all over again. So this is going to really cut down on the amount of time it takes you to plow through that paper just by implementing a system of opening it every day and identifying the next action. You don't have to do the next action every day. You do need to go back to it, but at least it will cut down on that big pile and you'll feel less intimidated and less stressed.
Okay, great, thanks. Another question is, should I keep stock certificates?
Yes, you should absolutely keep stock certificates because stock certificates are kind of like money. They're actually not just a useless piece of paper. What I would recommend with stock certificates is if there is a dividend reinvestment program, that you send the stock certificates in to be held onto by whoever maintains that dividend reinvestment program, so that you don't have to worry about where is my stock certificate, and they will hold on to it. And if you want to sell it, they can, you can go through them to sell it, and it actually makes it a lot less intimidating. But yes, stock certificates, if you do decide to continue to hold on to them yourself and not send them in to be held by a company, you should put them in your safe deposit box because they are very official documents.
Okay. Another question, I know you touched on this a little bit, but what do you consider a major purchase?
What do I consider a major purchase? Anything that's what you consider a lot of money. So, for you it might be $500. For another person it might be $2,000. For me, when it gets into the high hundreds, I consider that a major purchase. And like I said, I don't have a really strong reason why we should keep those kinds of receipts. It just feels right that if you pay $2,000 for something, you should hold on to the receipt for that. And I know every organizer that I've ever seen make a list of how long to keep documents always says keep the receipts for major purchases for as long as you hold the item. So it's going to be really a question for you as to what's a major purchase, but it's kind of an emotional reaction more than anything else.
Okay. And we had some questions come in related to health insurance paperwork.
Right.
So what paperwork needs to be saved relating to those medical costs and health insurance bills?
Okay, so if you are somebody who is able to deduct medical expenses on your tax return, your personal tax return, which means that your unreimbursed medical expenses exceed your adjusted gross income by, I think it's 1%, then you want to hold on to every medical bill that you paid or every medical receipt that you got or every check that you wrote to your medical professional. Chances are you probably can't deduct your medical expenses because exceeding 1% of your adjusted gross income is a pretty strict standard. But if you think you might, then hold on to all the proofs of what you paid. And then you probably would also want to hold on to proofs of what you got reimbursed, because you can only claim the unreimbursed medical expenses. So you will need to keep every single thing that you get from your insurance company, and if you can log on and get a report for the entire year of all of the things that you got reimbursed for, all the claims that you filed and everything you got reimbursed for, that would be really helpful, and then you don't have to save every individual piece of paper that you get from your company. I know mine is United Healthcare, and I can log on and see a report for the full year of how much I filed with them, how much they paid, how much I paid out of pocket. So that's very helpful. I used to keep it on a spreadsheet, but now I don't have to anymore because they do that for me. So just keep the pieces of information that are really going to be useful in figuring out what did I actually pay in medical expenses this year, and don't keep anything else.
Okay. And another question is, do you file electronic bills similar to paper bills?
I'm trying to interpret that question, meaning if I get my bills electronically through email, should I file them the same way as I would if I got them in the mail? And if that's the correct interpretation, I'll answer that. If that's not, please resubmit the question. But with the bills that I get electronically, I mentioned to you I always keep the latest bill. So if I get a bill electronically, I really, I go back to my 20th century roots. an old school person. I do print out that bill and stick it in my file under bills. And the reason I do that is because sometimes the reason that we are calling to speak to a service company is because the internet is down. And so if you can't get on and get that bill, I suppose if it's in my email, I could open my email and get it. But yeah, I do generally, if I want to hold on to a copy of a bill, I do print it out and put it in the file cabinet. If you want to just save it electronically onto your computer, you can do that as well. If I misinterpreted your question, please send it again.
Okay, we just got clarification that you did interpret it that way.
Oh, okay. I hope I answered it.
Yes.
Good.
Okay. And another question is, you mentioned shredding credit card offers, but what
Yes.
about other types of offers you get, such as cell phone, cable, bank?
I don't really worry that much about those. It really depends. Because I run a business from my home, I get letters all the time from, Verizon Fios and Time Warner Business Class, and they're always offering me to give me some upgraded service or whatever. I don't worry so much about that because that really is going to take place in my home. But anything that somebody could fill out and pretend to be me, and get some service that I wouldn't even know that they were getting, that I would shred.
Okay. Another question is, do you keep receipts for home-based businesses or business for only 3 years or longer?
I go by the 3-year rule with that. Yeah, I keep them just for 3 years. It's the same for businesses versus for my home-based business. It's the same as for my home, is that I just keep them for 3 years. Again, consult with your tax professional before you start shredding anything tax related. I don't want to be responsible, but my accountant makes me say that. But yeah, I think unless your tax professional has some specific reasons why you need to keep them longer, I think you're okay with just getting rid of them after 3 years.
Okay, and going back to a previous question, would you print out the receipt for a major purchase made online and file that as well?
That's a really interesting question. What I typically do is when I do a lot of mail order, I love to sit and shop at my computer. So when I get something in the mail, it generally has a packing slip in it with the amount on it, and I usually will stick that in my receipts file as the proof of the receipt. If I didn't have that, I suppose I might print it out online. I don't know. That's a very interesting question. I honestly don't know other than, yeah, I probably would. Yeah. Usually they have a packing slip. Like I buy a lot from Amazon, so they'll come in with the sheet and it'll have the price on it and the date and what it is exactly that I bought, and I file those away. Other companies might not always include that, and yeah, I probably would then print out the confirmation and file it in my file.
Okay. And relating to medical bills, if I have bills that have been processed from 3 years ago, should I shred them?
Yeah, I would. I would. Basically, once my insurance company, my medical insurance company, has sent me the explanation of benefits that shows me that they considered my expense and, paid on it or didn't pay on it or whatever, I can get rid of anything that I submitted to them. I now, basically, if you think about your medical expense process as a process, as a workflow. So I get something from the doc. I pay. I get some proof from the doctor. I add it to a claim form. I send it to my insurance company. They write back to me indicating whether they paid it or not paid it. So as that process goes through, you can discard papers from earlier in the process because what you have later is proof of what happened. So if you're keeping track of your medical expenses and you have the explanation of benefits showing that they believe you that you paid this amount to the doctor, you no longer need to keep the bill from the doctor because you've got a document that shows you that information if you need it.
Okay, do you have time for one last question?
Absolutely. I could stay here all day and talk about this.
Okay, great. The question is, if you elect to go paperless with service providers, are they required to keep copies of those bills for a certain amount of time?
So what I'm interpreting this to mean is if you are getting your bills and or statements electronically, how long will you be able to log on to their website and access those statements? This is what I'm hearing. So, and that's what I'm going to answer. So, I don't know if they are required to keep it a certain amount of time. I have a client who was trying to get her bills from 2014 so that we could work on her taxes earlier this year. And for the first half of 2014, she had to make a specific request to get those because they weren't available online, which I thought was pretty outrageous that they wouldn't have the entire year for something that she was filing the previous year. So what it might be better for you if it's something that you want to be able to save for your taxes or whatever, is to, when you get notification that those statements are available, is to download them and save them onto your computer. But generally, with most of the companies, if you're getting your things electronically, if you can't get it online, you can request it. And my client did eventually get them from Citibank, although they did not make it easy. But you can always request it if it's not up there. But if it's not too much trouble for you to log on there, look at it, and then just not while you're looking at it, just download it and save it, then at least you know you have them right there, and you can use them when you need them.
Okay, great. Well, we're about out of time, but I want to thank you again, Sharon, for such a wonderful presentation. Thanks to everyone who joined us today and asked some great questions. We hope you'll join us again, and thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I hope I hear from some of you. Bye now.
Great. Bye-bye.